Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining today's energy talk on Western Balkan renewable energy developments. We have started a series of energy talks in December last year, and since then, I think we have covered quite a few interesting topics, countries, and regions. And if you have an idea for a future energy talk and would like to be involved in one, naturally, we would be really delighted to hear from you. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items so that you know how to participate in today's energy talk. At any time during the talk, you will be able to submit questions to today's speakers. To do so, just type your question into Q&A at the bottom of the control panel. As time allows, our speakers will address as many questions as they can at the end during the Q&A part. You can also upload the questions or comment on the questions. So hopefully this is going to be quite interactive experience for all of us. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have Petar Mitrovic with us, Vice Chairman of AmCham Serbia Energy Committee. We have Magnus Johansson, Vice President at NBT. Dejan Jankovic, Project Manager at WF Alibunar Elisio. Maria Filipovska, partner at CMS, and Dr. Lawrence Kortani, public and business law at Tirana Business University. I'd like to thank today's speakers and also supporting organizations for making this event possible. Thanks to AmCham Serbia and also European Ukrainian Energy Agency. Thanks to our media partners, Albanian Energy Market blog by Lawrence Kortani, CE Energy News, New Europe, Alt Energy Magazine, and Energy Central. Thank you. And Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nessa. Good morning from my side. Thank you for tuning into the Energy Talk on Western Balkans. My name is Petar Mitrovic. In addition to being Vice Chair of Energy Committee in AmCham Serbia, I am a partner and the head of Regional Energy and Natural Resources Group at Karanovic & Partners, and I will be moderating today's panel, where we will discuss shift from coal to clean in the Western Balkans. Like we all know, we are witnessing a global energy transition that will change the way we live and do business in the years and decades to come. And even though this is not the first time that the world is making a transition from one major energy source to another, the key driver for this one is something completely new: decarbonization. The EU has a vision to get to a carbon neutral continent by 2050. By endorsing the green agenda for the Western Balkans in Sofia last year, the regional leaders committed to work together with the EU to reach this ambitious goal. It will not be an easy task. Like we all know, things are often not easy in the Western Balkans. But the first signals look promising, be it record low solar power prices in Albania, successful tenders for new solar power projects on old coal mines in North Macedonia, or ambitious regulatory reform in Serbia, together with the latest news on suspension on development of new thermal power plant in the country. Our panelists today will discuss the challenges and opportunities this transition is bringing in the region. They will also update us on the latest developments, and they will share some of their success stories, because we all need a bit of optimism in these tough times. It is my pleasure to introduce my fellow panelists. I will be presenting them in the order how they're going to speak. So the first one will be Mr. Magnus Johansson. He's a vice president at MBT. He will be followed by Dejan Jankovic, who is a project manager at Elisio, Serbia, project manager of Elisio's wind farm Alibunar. Big thanks to Dejan. He jumped in last minute as a replacement for Mr. Đurić, who had to cancel yesterday. So Dejan will not be having his presentation. Instead, we will discuss without slides, but hopefully this will be insightful. Then a dear colleague of mine, Maria Filipovska, who is a partner at CMS Law and head of the firm's operation in North Macedonia. and Dr. Lawrence Gordani, who is a lecturer at Tirana Business University. So I wouldn't take any more time from our panelists. Magnus, he is a newcomer to the region. He's coming from Kiev, where he has contributed on advancing the wind projects in Ukraine for MBT. MBT is a Norwegian-based developer and operator of wind farms with focus on emerging markets. The company currently has wind projects in China, 2 projects in Ukraine, totaling more than 1 gigawatt, and various projects under development in Southeast Europe. And what's mostly interesting for our region is that they've teamed up recently with Wind Vision on 800 megawatt wind portfolio in Serbia. So Magnus will be talking about successful implementation of Ukrainian projects and probably how this expertise would help him in the endeavors in Serbia, because he will be part of the development team working on these projects in Serbia. Magnus, please.
Thank you very much, Peter, and hello to everyone. Let's see if I can quickly open my slide. As you say, I'm quite a new face for Serbia, so it's interesting to, after having been almost 3 years in Ukraine, that I'm starting to explore a new market. Can you see the slide?
Yes, it's great.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so NBT is, as you mentioned, a Norwegian wind developer who's been active ever since for the last 10, 12 years, where we first, for various reasons, started in China. It's a bit interesting how a Norwegian company ends up there, but that's a story for a glass of wine later if somebody's curious. We had our first success story there, where we built the first wind project in China with full non-recourse financing, which, as you all know, is in most cases the best way of financing renewable projects, and the general model that is used by IFIs around the world. After spending some years developing and building a few wind projects in China, totaling 150 megawatt, together with some key industrial partners there, we started to move west, where we had also a few years in and out of a few other markets that are not mentioned here, but they were sort of on the path towards the west, where eventually we ended up setting a footprint in Ukraine. We were here already before the revolution in 2014, looking into the market. That put us, of course, a little bit back. And then after the Maidan revolution in 2014 started to calm down, we increased our efforts, and we started first developing our Sivash project, which is a 246 megawatt wind project, which I will talk a little bit more about later, which is now reaching COD. And we started also developing another larger project also in Ukraine, which has the theoretical capacity of up to 800 megawatts almost. And then in the last year and a half, we have also started to expand out of Ukraine and with the background in China into the Southeast European markets, partly for diversification, partly for the natural transition, you might call it. If you have, let's say, succeeded, if you manage something in Ukraine, you can most likely manage in many other neighboring countries, because it is a challenging market here. And we have, among others, put our eyes actively on Serbia, which we think is very interesting. And we did that partly with the success of teaming up with Wind Vision. This is a snapshot of one project that we have done, which is the mentioned Sivash wind project. We are a co-equity partner with Total Eren, the French oil company. And we then developed this project, managed the financing together with EBRD and with JP Morgan, and then coordinating quite a lot of the construction together with Total Eren. We're quite proud that we received a bronze award from EBRD on the side of sustainability policies that were implemented. And I think for those who have looked at financing a large project before, you will be having big eyes when you see that we had 8 different banks in this syndicate, in this financing on the debt side, which is pretty much unheard of. And that was partly because it was very hard to attract enough capitals from one bank into Ukraine. So we expanded the pool, and we actually were the the path opener for several of these European development banks into Ukraine. So that's where we're quite proud of that. And the total investment, the capex of this project sits around 380 million euros. And it will be now construction commissioned. It's phased commission, but it's being finalized now in June. This is a short snapshot of the partner that allowed us to enter into the Serbian market. Winvision is a name that's been around the street for a long time. I think among others is quite impressive how they have attracted other partners too, such as BlackRock, into other markets where they have also developed projects. And they have, at least when we were assessing their capabilities and projects, we were very impressed by what they have done so far, and we're very happy that we can have such a solid local partner to team up with on a co-development agreement. So, I mean, very short for Serbia, I am still quite new to Serbia. I could go much more in detail in Ukraine, but obviously something that stands out for me very clearly is the large component of coal. Just by quickly comparing the energy mix with Ukraine, here you sit with much more nuclear, which means it's a harder market to bring a lot of intermittent capacity into, because nuclear is unadjustable, and also that whenever you bring intermittent capacity on top, it creates challenges in the grid, at least when you bring in a lot. Serbia is a bit different, where you have the baseload being coal. And it's quite interesting, at least for us, to see the very small component being renewable intermittent capacity, which we think means that Serbia has a very natural trend or a rationale for significantly expanding into renewables. And also because you see in many markets around the world that renewables are not only the one that produces, call it the least or the best air, but it also starts more and more to become the most economical source of electricity. So I think and I hope that Serbia will have a large integration of a lot of renewable capacity in the next decade. And we will be very, very happy, of course, to be among the drivers and the vehicles to help Serbia decarbonize. This is an overview of the portfolio that has been developed by Winvision, which we are now co-developing together. Most of these capacities are sitting in a certain region, and they are in all different phases. So some assets are, as they call it, ready to build, Alibunar 1 and 2. And some assets are somewhat developed, and some assets are still early stage development. And of course, this is something we can talk more about in detail on separate notes. And this also indicating some potential timelines that can be achieved if the regulatory environment allows for these capacities to be included. I often tend to say that if a country is a car and you want to go from A to B, in the case of Serbia, you want to decarbonize, so you're moving from A, which is a fossil fuel energy mix, towards B, which is a greener decarbonized sector. you have the country management as the driver, and then the stakeholders like ourselves and the banks and others are the engines that drive the country forward. So depending on the fuel that you put in terms of regulation and other political risk, the car will take you so for in such a speed as you choose as a driver. So so far we're very happy with what has been communicated and done by the Serbian government. We quite frankly been very impressed by the speed and also the more transparent setup Serbia has chosen compared to such countries like Ukraine. So we're quite optimistic about the next coming years for this transition that the country is going through. So I think that's short and sweet from my side, and then of course happy to take questions afterwards.
Thank you, Magnus, for this insightful presentation. Happy to hear that we share the same views, basically what is needed in order to make a success story, especially in Serbia. We will definitely need good synergy among all the stakeholders and policymakers to make this regulatory reform successful. We can touch bases later on that to discuss what would be maybe your expectations in this respect, what you think will be critical to address in the bylaws that the government is preparing. But yeah, we can discuss about that in the Q&A session if there is time. In the meantime, Dan joined us as well. Dan, thanks again for jumping in. We will not have the presentation, but because Elisio is already well known and we are all aware of your projects that are operational in Serbia, I'm sure we will be able to have a fruitful and meaningful discussion even without the presentation. For those of the participants who still do not know Elisio or are not completely familiar with the Serbian market, would you, for the beginning, maybe just say a couple of words about the company, about the existing projects, about the potential intended projects?
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for the invitation for this event. Sorry, time was too short to prepare some proper presentation for that. So at the beginning, I will present first our company. As Elisio is well known on Serbia market renewable sector. Also, worldwide, we are active in Belgium and in France. Company is active more than 20 years in renewables, and at the moment is operating more than 1.1 gigawatt of installed capacity offshore, and also roughly 400 megawatts onshore. So a lot of projects realized, huge experience of 20 years. Also in Serbia, we are active since 2009. Successfully, we developed and realized two projects. One is Malibunar with installed capacity of 8 megawatt, and also Alibunar with installed capacity of 42 megawatts power. So Malibunar is connected on medium voltage grid, on distribution operator system, and Alibunar on TSO.
Yeah. Unlike MBT in Ukraine, you did not have a syndicate of 8 banks, but still the financing part was pretty challenging. It was crucial to ensure bankability of these projects, to ensure that there will be appropriate allocation of risks among participants. We are witnessing the reform, substantial reform of this incentive framework and incentive schemes. Your company is a member of Renewable Energy Serbia Association, Renewable Energy Sources Association. You have representatives in the working group of the Ministry of Energy. What do you expect will be the critical things to address in these bylaws in order to make this new incentive scheme, incentive system bankable like the previous one?
As association, which is founded by operational wind parks in Serbia. We are active in developing new wind parks, and also we are supporting all developers in Serbia. So everyone are welcome to participate. Together with government, we are active in preparation of bylaws. And we are trying to have, from investors' point of view, as much as possible good bylaws with clear description of auctions, which all of us expecting to have it as soon as possible. Transparent procedures, and also the main challenge is to have clear rules on the market, to have bankable projects which could be realized without too much risk. Of course, there is no possible to have project without risk, but it has to be minimized or at least recognized before financing. And also a very important part and challenging will be balancing of production. So all of active and operational wind parks recognize that in the future that will be very, very challenging. So it has to be described on very good way in new bylaws. We are expecting to have open market, daily market. So we are supporting government to have all that rules prepared before first auctions.
Yeah. Interesting that you mentioned balancing of the market. What is, I mean, what is the investors, the producers can do in order to minimize that risk? Is this a good investment in good technology, good measurements, proper planning? Because we are, I mean, what we've been hearing, not only in Serbia, but from the rest of the energy community, is that this should be basically a transitional phase. The renewables should be able to be market participants, real market participants. That implies balancing responsibility. We will have this transitional period where the balancing responsibility will be assumed by authorized contracting party. But if we have in front of ourselves deadlines for realization of these projects, by the time most of the projects are on grid, most likely the market will be liquid, and there will be no assumption of balancing responsibility. What do you think the government needs to do itself in order to make sure that at least during this transitional period, producers are well protected?
From a balancing point of view, first, we as investors have to be ready, and we are active in that, also in France and Belgium, to have as better as possible predictions of our production. It's not always possible because we know that predictions of wind speed are sometimes not quite good, but we are trying to use new technologies, new software, and to have as best as possible predictions. It will be very important to have it good prepared and to follow it on proper way, because how we recognize from draft documents which are now already prepared, the cost of balancing will be very big challenge. From governance, we expect to prepare bylaws on proper way to recognize technical possibilities of to have good predictions of production, because for wind you have to have big margin of 20, 25, even 30% if you want to have good predictions, and also to have good described possible cost of balancing. If you want to have bankable project, we should know what is the volume of that cost. That is important for the investors.
Okay. But do you maybe see this real implementation of balancing market as also as opportunity for you, because that opens up a new market where you can trade in electricity, or that's something that you have not considered yet?
Of course, we see that as opportunity as a company which has wide experience with more than 20 years. Operational wind parks, of course, we are involved in preparation of good predictions for our wind parks, and we could be able to participate in the market with that service.
Okay, great. And when, I mean, the topic here and the key focus of this, not only this panel, but the transition itself, is decarbonization. We heard from Magnus that Serbia, but also most of the region, is heavily dependent on coal. What do you think, when can we realistically, as Serbia, as region, switch to greener?
Yeah, because that is the topic of this event. I have some overview of installed capacity at the moment in Serbia, and the structure of production capacities. Too bad if you look that the decarbonization is mandatory in next years. Actually, installed capacity is roughly 13,000 megawatts of installed capacity in Serbia. And if you look that renewables together with big hydropower plant are in capacity of 3,500 megawatts, then we see that there is a lot of space to have new capacities from renewables installed. Just for instance, wind parks are represented now with total capacity of 400 megawatts, and in comparing with total capacity, it's only 3.22%. So it's too low in this structure, and even much worse for solar is that it is 0.08%. So we have all together investors, government, and all associations to work all together to increase the volume of renewables in this total.
Yeah, in all honesty, when it comes to solar in Serbia, it's not a surprise, considering that we basically had no incentives for solar. The caps, the quotas were very low, up to 10 megawatts overall for the entire country. But the things are changing now. I mean, we've heard from the transmission system operator that at this point, they have requests for connection to the transmission system for more than 400 megawatts of solar. That was basically a direct result of the announcement and successful beginning of the regulatory reform. Thank you, Dan. We'll come back to you later in the Q&A session. We'll now hear from Macedonia, from North Macedonia. We have with us Maria Filipovska, who is a partner at CMS and heads the firm's operation in North Macedonia. We heard some great news from North Macedonia in relation to deployment of renewables, especially in solar. There was a public-private partnership tender for construction of new projects, new solar projects on old coal mines in Oslome. That's really interesting, both, I mean, useful and like a message. So, Maria, please give us updates on what's happening in North Macedonia nowadays.
Hvala, Petra. Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Good afternoon to you all. So, as Petra said, my name is Maria Filipovska, and I'm a partner of CMS North Macedonian office. So, just a very short introduction. CMS is an international law company that operates in all continents apart from North America. And we have strong legal offices in the region, and we are connected with the CE and the EU CMS law offices on daily level when it comes to the renewable energy department and other departments. So that said, I would go to my slides basically, and in the next 15 minutes, I will more or less try to summarize information for the clean energy trends in North Macedonia. As they refer they are similar to the region, however, they are quite different. So I will try to do it from the aspect of interest, basically for the investors. So can you come back to the previous slide, please? So when talking about this topic, I would like to introduce the following aspects. First of all, the current status of the clean energy, the trends that we see that are in the focus, so not all, just the main ones. Of course, the strategic goals which are planned by the government and the future development that we see of the clean energy. And of course, the opportunities for the existing investors and the new investors which are expected in the next period. So next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, the current status is that at this point, about 90% of the total domestic production of electricity comes from the North Macedonian state-owned company ESM, and is predominantly dependent on coal. So basically, what Magnus already said is the same and can be applied on Macedonia as well. The coal is generally used for operating the two biggest energy production plants, the one in Oslomej and then the one in Bitola. However, due to the problems with the coal or the lack of it, basically, what we see is that the Oslomej electricity power plant is not working, and basically our main source at this point is the Bitola energy facility. We will come back to the projects which are planned as renewable projects on top of this coal production complexes. What I would also now want to mention is another, at this point, energy complex which works on petroleum, and which is interesting because it is also something that will be interesting for renewable energy in the next period, and this is the Negotino energy complex. So due to the geographics of the country and the many natural resources and water that we have, we traditionally use hydropower. So there are 8 big hydropower plants which are state-owned, and more than 100 which are predominantly privately owned. So when compared to the region, excluding Bosnia and to some point Serbia, although hydropower is traditionally used as electricity source, what we don't see as a project, and this is what makes Macedonia, North Macedonia, sorry, very interesting for further development and for further investments, is that we see significantly low number of wind and solar projects. I will come back to this question later. I will just mention another point here, and that is that the energy law and the subsequent bylaws are mainly harmonized with the EU acquis, so with the third package, and we see this as a good and solid legal ground, basically, for new projects. And I would also like to point out, in order to wrap it up, in order to the current status, to be clear, is that we are heavily import dependent. You see here some information on the total annual production of electricity that we import and that we have. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is a very short graphical overview. It looks a lot like the Serbian one. And as you can see, the solar and the wind are barely riding this wave. We are coal mainly coal dependent. Next slide, please. So I would like to analyze the clean energy legislation, but only from 2 points. I will not go into legal details. I would like to point out two aspects, basically. Whether our current legal system represents a solid and secure legal ground for investors, and whether it creates opportunities or issues for investors, especially in the light of the fact that we don't see solar and wind projects. The only wind project that we see is a state-owned wind project and one in construction. So this is something that we will come back to later. I will not use the same order to introduce the laws here, and I will be very short, I promise. So the energy law is followed by many bylaws, which are mainly harmonized with the EU third package. There are some aspects that should be further harmonized and which are connected to the Directive 2009/28, which regulates the promotion of usage of renewable energy. The decree on supportive measures is very interesting for investors, and this is why we are pointing it out here, because it regulates very favorable conditions for renewable energy investors through premiums, feed-in tariffs, granting of privileged power producers, etc. The idea behind this decree is to encourage the investments in renewable energy. The law on energy efficiency, I will only mention it only from the aspect that it fully implements the relevant European Union energy efficiency regulations, and it encourages ultimately private and public companies to use the sustainable energy. The law on strategic investments is not directly connected to the renewable energy, but I will mention it here because it is a relatively new law, and it turns out that it provides a really nice ground for very big projects, which does not necessarily have to be PPP or concession, and which have a really good really good basis for negotiating the terms and the conditions of the agreements. And we already see that a lot of waste management projects are going through this law, which ultimately provide space for and ground for renewable energy, because they're very often connected to the production of renewable energy from waste. I will very shortly say that when compared to the region, the practice of our institutions is on a very low point when it comes to solar and when it comes to wind, and this is why they're very open for experiences from the EU and from other countries, whereas we have a good knowledge, or our institutions have good knowledge of hydropower and quite good practice. Next slide, please. Okay, so when it comes to current practices, as Petar mentioned, we have a photovoltaic plant project in Oslomej, and it is intended to replace the coal with clean energy. It is a currently ongoing project. We see a discussion on the table for such photovoltaic plant also for Bitola, which is the main coal electricity power plant at this point. We see many private investors that are interested either in direct investments in wind power or in purchasing companies which are licensed. So this is very exciting for us. We hope that this trend will continue. We see some waste managed projects, as I said, and of course there is an information for new location for small hydropower plants. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so very shortly on the energy development strategy. This is, from a legal point of view, at least the most important document. because it provides and defines the strategic goals that the government has. It's a big and robust document. I will try to summarize the main topics. The strategy basically works on and is divided on priorities, scenarios, opportunities, and objectives. This also refers to legal and regulatory aspects. So I will be very short on the strategy because it's the same, I think, everywhere in the region, including Serbia, Bosnia, Montenegro, etc. It focuses on energy efficiency by maximizing the energy savings, on integration and security of energy markets. This is very interesting to us because it basically stipulates even stronger integration of North Macedonia with the European Union. Decarbonization, as Petar mentioned, this is the most important topic, and I will come back to it later because in all three scenarios we see that the government has recognized the issue with the lack of wind and solar, and they're pushing these technologies as growing technologies in different scenarios, and of course cost optimization and competitiveness. What is very interesting to me as a lawyer are the scenarios that we see. These are three, so reference, this is basically more or less business as usual, moderate transition, and strong decarbonization. They have different dynamics, different plans and statistics, and I will not go into details, but I will try to reflect on the specifics and the most important aspects of each. What we see is that there are strong planned financial support mechanisms for investors in all three scenarios. In all three scenarios, the thermal power plant, which is the biggest at this point, Oslomes, is fully phased out and is replaced with solar power plant. And in the moderate and the green scenario, also the Bitova lignite power plant is replaced. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so just as an information, it is expected that photovoltaic and wind power plant in all three scenarios will be the growing technologies, while the small hydropower plants, as it says, should be carefully assessed to avoid the impact on environment. Next slide. What is a fact actually and is interesting to us is that although the energy development strategy for the period until 2040 is very clear on the usage of the renewable energy, the ESM, which is the state-owned company plan, provides information on two potential lignite mines, which will provide these plants with lignite in the next 15 years. So if North Macedonia was a car, and we hope that it will not be driven by the mines, but by the wind and solar. And as to wrap it up, to close, the opportunities that we see for investor is optimization of the existing energy potentials and new investments. Solar, obviously, hardly tapped. We really see that we will see more of these projects. We see interest in wind projects. As I said, like other countries in the region, the hydropower is also here, and we know that there are discussions on the table for new locations. Negotino power plant is something that is planned to work on natural gas. This might be a very interesting project as well, because it currently runs on petroleum. And also, what I'm very excited about is that we see the projects for production of electricity from waste management. Next slide, please. As I said, we have a regional renewable energy department that can help you at any time with whatever information you may need. I would like to thank you all for your time, and I will just pass the mic to Petar again. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. It was really interesting to hear firsthand from these developments in North Macedonia. We'll definitely get back to some of the topics you mentioned during your presentation in the Q&A session. And now the last speaker for today, Dr. Lorenz Gordani. He is coming from Tirana Business University. Apart from this academia background, he is also external expert for EU delegation in Albania on energy matters. So it will be interesting to hear more about developments in Albania, especially following these successful tenders that were big hit last year and this year with record low prices offered by Voltalia for this Karavasta solar power plant. Dr. Gordani, please take the floor. We don't hear you. You are muted.
Thank you very much, Peter. Going ahead directly with my presentation, I want to start mentioning that to open the slide presentation, my presentation in my presentation version. Okay. Going ahead, dear colleagues and participants, in my presentation, I want to start mentioning that recently.
Dr. Gordani, apologies. We don't see you. We hear you, but we don't see you. So if you want to turn on the camera, please.
Okay, then I have to shift my camera to open another camera.
Okay, however you prefer. No, it's okay.
In this way, probably you see me. You see both me and the presentation. Yes. Now.
Yes.
Okay, let's go further. Then I wanted to start mentioning that recently Energy Transition Track Index ranks Albania as one of the best countries in the region, in the 25th spot. Talking about the private sector involvement and development in RS, today or the last year has seen the enter in production of around 20 power plants, out of which 18 in hydropower and 2 in photovoltaics. Their total installed capacity is estimated at 227 megawatts, where the most of capacity belongs to the Moglica hydropower. In total, the installed capacity of private generation power plants is 1,000 megawatts. And on April, the Parliamentary Assembly approved the law on a special procedure for negotiation with Bechtel to design and construct the Skavica hydropower plant. Albania has been, as known, one of the first countries in the South Europe region to introduce the auction for renewable energy with the support of Energy Community Secretariat and EBRD. And the new framework sees the engagement for developing of around 700 megawatt capacity in alternative renewables within 2020. The first contract was awarded to the French renewable company Voltalia to build a large-scale 140 megawatt power plant photovoltaic of Karavasta. The company has already started the construction in February 2021. On March, the French renewable company Voltalia has also won the contract for the construction and operation of 100 megawatt solar plant located in the area of Spitala, Durrës. By other side, soon Albania will open a competition for the construction of a floating photovoltaic plant of 13 megawatts on the Valdez hydropower plant. The EBRD has extended a 9.1 million euros loan to Albania state-owned power utility cash. Meanwhile, cash has started the work to construct and install a photovoltaic plant in one of the dams, again in the Valdez hydropower plant, with a nominal power of 5.14 megawatt peak. The development of the alternative renewables has become a vital priority for Albania. The country has adopted the most favorable option for the network, for the net metering that scheme that it is operate from the June 2019. Albania has announced at the end of 2020 the launching of the country's first hybrid auction for utility scale onshore wind power plants. The auction is prepared with the support of EBRD and is expected in the weeks ahead for a total capacity project of 150 megawatts to receive a support measure. As a source of energy production, the wind has not been yet exploited in Albania, despite the high potential it presents and above 4,200 megawatts licenses already awarded from 2007. The above framework agreement was finalized with the approval of the Consolidated National Action Plan, which has raises the biomass from 8 megawatt to 41 megawatts. And Albania is experiencing a growing trend of using electrical cars. During 2020, electrical vehicles registered were 317 units and so far in Tirana there are more than 10 taxi services companies that use electrical cars. Passing to the other aspect about the opening of the energy market services regarding the audit and management, the Agency for Energy Efficiency announced on May 2021 the reaching of 4,360 energy performance certificates in buildings issued at less in the 3 months. In particular, recently the Directive 27/2012 has been revised, firstly in 2019 and further in 2021 to harmonize the fully comply with the requirements of European Union. In additional law on energy performance of building has been completed with more than 10 legal acts and regulatory measure. The above has brought the issuance of the first energy performance certificate in February 2029. And the main mandatory energy practices can be found in the here slides that for lack of time we don't have to explain it specifically. But regard the up to now plans performed, the implementation and the proposed measure of the National Action Plan in energy efficiency present an estimated or direct support from public budget to around 1,010 million euros within 2020. And many new measures and acts are in the process or in the upcoming short period. Then rapidly passing to the new perspective opened by the market integration in the Southeast Europe and its regional implication with the eventually connection with Italy. Alpex is already established in the last October by Albanian transmission operator and the counterpart of Kosovo, KOST. And recently, Albania has reached another milestone in the electricity market reforms. The new balancing, sorry, because I jumped a slide, maybe it's interesting, this one. Recently, Albania has reached another milestone in its electricity market reforms. The new balancing rules are in force from 1st April 2021, introducing market-based procurement price formation. And the Albanian Power Exchange Alpex has just completed the public call for the electronic trading platform for the day-ahead and intraday markets. It aims to implement the European Union's target model for day-ahead and intraday markets at the end of this year. The distribution utility OSHE has been transformed already into a holding company with 3 subsidies from 2018. Then today the OSHE is legally unbundled while functional unbundling is still ongoing. The liberalization of the market started in 2018 for customers connected to the 35 kV voltage and has been already completed and with the needed investment already also for the 20 kV. Then practically going to the end of my presentation. On November 2017 was ratified by Albania Parliament, the Assembly, the law between the government of Republic of Albania and the KfW regarding the project of transmission interconnection with a line with Albania and Macedonia. Along the April 2021, Mytilenius company from Greece has announced the reaching of agreement with the OSD for development of 400 kV network among Albania side, among Albania and Macedonia, North Macedonia, and further the concert signed a contract agreement for the upgrade of SCADA and the EMC system with OSD. Then, notwithstanding searching to keep in some ways synthetic within time given, I hope it is my presentation have provided the main element about the opportunities and options that already are offered from the prominent Albania energy market, and I remain open to any question and about above or other that we can discuss or you can find, for example, in my platform day by day.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. I mean, let's stay with you. I simply cannot move away from this topic of Voltalia standard last year and less than 25 euros per megawatt hour for solar power that they offered. What do you think was the critical factor to make that investor so comfortable with offering such a low price? I mean, it's definitely lower than anything we've seen in the region. Is that the craving for new capacities? Is that the prospect of new consumers in Albania? Is that an appropriate regulatory framework, EBRD support? What do you think was the critical factor there?
First of all, I would say that probably it has to do with radiation, solar radiation, but it could not be the only one, because otherwise we are seeing the prices in the Greece. The medium price has been 40 euro for megawatt hour, so and many times it has been even higher. Further, it can be the size of the investment, 140 megawatts. Further, it has to do with the hybrid regime. And what I can extend more, it has to do with the perspective about the development of the market, the integration with the regional market, a more prominent Italian or European market, the forecast that probably based to technical studies of the companies, and different facilities. For example, it has to do with the land, offer it. And offer it practically in package in the auction procurement process, and all the process, it has been prepared in a package, so the investor, for example, don't have to care or don't have to worry about any aspect about the grid connection, about the land uses, or about any procedure and any other aspect. So in the end, I think the investor, for example, we have seen that Voltalia, of course, is a well-known name, renowned name in the solar market. It is one of the biggest six group in the French, and probably but in the same time we have. So there is a combination of different aspects. For example, I would draw the attention to the bid in in some way the same group has done in Portugal in a year after that. The price, it was even lower than this. So it is a different combination of the different aspects, and let's say that in some way Albania reached, or all the process have been accompanied with the support not only of Energy Community Secretariat like a political body, but also the direct support of EBRD. All of these have, of course, made that to make it a successful process. And it has resulted with the price that you already mentioned.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear these thoughts, especially considering that we in Serbia are looking into large-scale solar projects as a future, and the things you mentioned about the land and how it was resolved is something that I was happy to hear, because nowadays in Serbia we have certain limitations for use of agricultural land for these solar projects or renewable projects in general, which, especially when non-fertile, could be a real deal for these projects and for boost of these projects. So thank you for your response. So far we have received one question from the audience, from Ms. Eva Kazanskia. I hope I pronounced it properly. What capacity for renewables is identified by the government state utility of Serbia for development within the next 5 to 10 years? Dejan, is this something you would like to take?
Let's say it's more a question for operator of transmission system.
We don't have them present here,
but we don't have presented him. But as we are as association deeply involved in all new projects on the market, in our knowledge, at the moment, that capacity is roughly 3,000 megawatts in this moment.
Yeah.
What will be in next years now with this new law, which first time recognized renewables on proper way, we expect to be even more.
Yeah. From what I know or remember, is that we don't have official updated statistics about this. I think that the government, the Ministry of Energy, is working on updating the data, but there are other stakeholders that measure this potential. Naturally, different sources put exact figures at different levels. I mean, but it's pretty optimistic. It ranges from up to 3 gigawatt of solar potential and 3.5 gigawatt in wind potential, to as high as 7 gigawatt in solar and 29 gigawatt in wind, which is probably an overstatement, but either way, the potential is very promising. And like Dan mentioned, the law recognized the renewables as a matter of public interest. So most likely it is expected that it will create an environment for successful utilization and realization majority of this potential. The new law, I mean, it's definitely the modern one, issued and adopted fastly in open, transparent procedures. It envisages friendly environment for investors, with basically possibility to apply for subsidies in early stage of development and have up to 6 years in order to develop a project, which is definitely a good thing and increases the competition, lowers the price, but at the same time leaves a window open for a couple of years without new capacities. Magnus, you were mentioning the challenges you had in Ukraine. You were mentioning that it was a tough market. What do you think could be done in Serbia to ensure that we see new projects on the grid even before these 5 or 6 years the investors will have at disposal under the law on renewables?
That's a good question. I mean, if you, how to say it, I think everyone in this conversation and also attendees have heard of the concept LCOE, which is the cost of installing new capacity. And that one has been a downward declining curve, right? And so a lot of the record bids that you see around the world is based on the assumption that price continues to be lower and lower going forward, or that efficiency continues to increase and increase. So basically for solar, it's been a lot about reducing the panel costs and associated costs. For wind, it's about increasing capacity. But overall, the general topic has always been the longer you can wait, the lower the prices. And that is obviously a good path if you want to have record low prices, but also it results then in later implementation. So there's always a questions about the urgency of the decarbonization, for example. I mean, for Serbia, if you, for example, in the current proposed law, where you have, as I understand it, 2 + 3 + 1 year possibility, it is quite likely that most stakeholders will then make competitive bids to wait as long as possible to install the project so that you can make it most economically under that low bid. And this is basically a direct trade-off where you're choosing the urgency of decarbonization on one side, and then the size of competition, the amount of stakeholders you want on the other side. And this topic is really only answered by the driver of the car, right, which is the government of Serbia, which is all about, or actually also it's about the European Green Deal, because quite frankly, the European community is more and more putting pressure on Serbia to decarbonize as part of the Green Deal. So it's now becoming more than just a Serbian driver as well. They have a navigator sitting next, who is the European Union. So it will be interesting to see what will be the final setup, because in the initial discussions, there was this higher requirement. You needed to have, I mean, basically the project ready to start construction, and then you had the 3 years. And now it's a different setup where the bar is lower, but the timeline to build is longer, which, I mean, both models are applied around the world, and they have this different rationales. So it's all about the government of Serbia to choose what they want, really. I mean, for our case, Ali Bunar is literally ready to build. So it could be a project that you can build quite quickly to help this initial decarbonization process. But at the same time, if sort of the entry bar is lowered, we will obviously also
I think your internet connection, yeah. Magnus is back with us, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were interrupted. Probably the connection was.
Yes, I fell out. So yeah, so in short, I mean, it's the trade-off is chosen by the driver. But I think what is very important to have in mind is that when you see competitive auctions, which is very good, you will also have stakeholders working to the maximum degree of optimizing their business case, because you read about the record high prices, that's sort of the headline, and then you see some description, but behind sits a lot of optimization work, business model work, multidisciplinary. So there's a lot of input going into a bid price. And all these layers are sometimes a little bit forgotten.
Thank you for this. We can only hope that the government will manage to find appropriate compromise between costs involved and timing needed to implement this project and leads to faster deployment of renewable technology. Thank you, Magnus.
I think also what you can do, which is in many European countries, is you put the ceiling price. I mean, if there is a worry about
there will be a ceiling price. There will be a ceiling price.
Exactly.
There will be a ceiling price.
And then that is a way where you can literally yourself choose a little bit where is your maximum level. And then it makes it easier to steer this trade-off. Okay.
Thank you for this. We've received a question that could be called an elephant in the room, and the discussion about the costs for excluding coal as energy source in Serbia, Bosnia, and Kosovo, and who will pay for the major costs. I mean, that's a tough question, because I think that the relevant governments have not prepared decarbonization plans. the governments are working on integrated energy and climate action plans, and I'm sure that one part of these plans will be the costs related to decarbonization. Green Deal agenda, Sofia declaration that the regional leaders signed last year offers around 9 billion euros of help for these processes, these and similar initiatives. So it will be definitely a tough task for the governments, but something that will need to be tackled sooner rather than later, because however the costs are high to decarbonize the economy, cost of failure to do that would be even higher. That's what we can see and hear from all relevant sources around the world. Back to North Macedonia, a rising star in the eyes of the energy community in this region. Praises from the entire Europe are coming in North Macedonia for the initiatives there. Maria, you mentioned in your presentation the law on strategic investments. Is that a part of the reason for these praises? The concept sounded interesting. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Yes, thank you, Petar. No, the law is not the reason on the praises. Actually, this government has recognized how important the decarbonization process is, and how important it is to harmonize the goals, at least on paper, with the goals of the European Union. So basically, putting the strategy until the 2040 on the table with more or less a clear agenda on the way in which the country want to go with the decarbonization, I think is the main layer. The second one is the help that we are getting from the European Union and financing that is planned. So these are, I think, the layers for or the reason for why we see North Macedonia on the renewable energy map at this point. I am a bit disappointed that it didn't happen at the same time when it happened in Serbia, in Bosnia, and in other countries in region, because I see that you guys are making amazing job with the wind farms and the solar, etc. However, we really hope that this will happen. So to answer your question, why we as lawyers see this new law on strategic investment as an interesting point. This is because it provides in addition to the PPPs and the concessions, a totally different manner of handling a big project. So the idea behind this is to, and I will try to be very short, the idea behind this is to put a project on a, to grant a project with a separate so-called strategic investment status. By providing it, what the investor is getting is a totally different approach when it comes to the financing. So there are very clear indications on how it can be financed through individual financing, etc., etc. There are more favorable aspects for the investor from the point that unlike the PPPs and the concessions, which are very often connected to strict agreements, there is a much bigger possibility for negotiating the content, the timing, the agreement, etc. And what is very interesting from a legal point of view or a nerdy point of view is that at the end of this negotiation process, there is a separate law for that project only that is enacted. So the project gets the status of a law and all aspects which should be regulated are regulated in accordance with this law. And this is why, and we already see that very interesting projects are basically approaching based on this law, mainly waste management and production of electricity from waste management. We'll see how the government will deal with this in practice. However, it sounds really good.
Yeah, and it probably will lead to or contribute to faster implementation, easier implementation. Yeah, just one note. I mean, I worked with Maria, and she's definitely not a nerdy lawyer. So even these boring stuff, I think she can make them interesting. Thank you, Maria, for that. Yeah, and glad to hear these special procedures are ongoing in North Macedonia, helping boosting the project. That will probably, in order not to see the situation that we have in our Q&A window, that's for Dr. Gordani. Apparently, we have a guest that sees some obstacles for wind power in Albania, and pretty frustrating information that there's a project in development from 2008. So maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Naturally, it takes time to explain in detail or to find all the reasons, but I would want to start with the fact that wind energy deployment potential is offered today, as I mentioned before, by the market opening. This is the cue of the reply, but going with order, again, I would say that it is already announced, the hybrid auction for utility scale onshore wind power plants. Offshore and onshore, sorry, again, and this is coming with the support of EBRD. We have already now the capacity in this direction, preparing the auction in regard, and with the particular support of Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs that has provided a grant funding for support the technical studies in wind auction. So one of the main problems up to now have done with fact that there have not been a reliable as needed technical studies for a very long time, how they are needed. By the other part, there is a kind of separation, let's say in some way, even not mentioned very well, but for example, regard Albania and Macedonia, it is pushing and it is aiming more in the photovoltaic power plants. Regard the other countries, it is more regard the aeolic. But by the other side, the fact is that now in region are different companies which make another with favorization to the fact of the deployment of this technology. As I already mentioned, even there are the interest has been very long from a long period, but we have to remember that at least up to a certain period, the hydropower has been more interesting by LCOE or the cost of production. It has been more competitive. Now it is not more something is already overpassed, and the cost of wind and photovoltaic, of course, are in reduction day by day. So we have to see the reduction of cost, and for the rest, even the rise or the option to deliver the wind. So in this direction, it can be said that already are expected the reduction of costs came from different aspects like the tender, but or the procedures or the other aspects, as I mentioned, the presence in the region. And another facts have to do even with the takeoff of the energy that it is produced and needs a reliable grid that it is reinforced and invested due to power exchange, and it is made possible also due to the open of power exchange to give more option to deliver it, as well as the other option are offered by the combined the technology with photovoltaic or the natural gas, for example. In Albania, it is already open this option now with the completion of the TAP project that offer another advantage. And the retail market and supply, direct supply, or the kind of industrialization that it is improving, it is also making again more attractive this technology. And the last but not least, the road access. We are investing from a very long period to reinforce the network, road network, that it make feasible or the accessible areas that have preclusive or have been closed in the previous period. As also mentioned, the interconnection, interconnection now with also very shortly, up to 2 years with Macedonia will offer another option, and the interconnection line among Montenegro and Italy, and the advance of the power exchange of the regional power exchange, let's say. These are less or more some of the key aspects, because of course there are needed many other considerations, deeper one.
Thank you, Doctor. Yeah, you mentioned an important aspect for further deployment of renewable projects in this region, and that will be market coupling, definitely. We as single markets cannot stand these projects on market terms independently, but as a unified market, I think it will be a good opportunity for further deployment, and it's closely connected with something that we have not been mentioning today, but what seems to be pretty popular in the last couple of years, and these are corporate PPAs. Magnus, Dejan, you are investors in new projects, you have operational projects. From everything we hear, this incentives system, however implemented, will be a transitional phase towards full market integration of renewable projects. Corporate PPAs, is that something you are considering as your business case? Both of you can answer, agree among yourselves how to do that.
I'll let Dejan go first. You know Serbia better than me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Magnus. Corporate PPA for sure is one of the key topics for the future for our company, and we are looking for opportunities and possibilities to start to work on that way, generally to find companies which will be able to sign corporate PPA. Normally, with this new law and bylaws, all investors are interested in that, and maybe that tendency will be even better than to be participant on auctions. Let's see what future will bring.
Magnus, your thoughts on this? Yeah.
I mean, on the conceptual level, I think there are 3 key components for the ones in corporate. One is the difference in price between, I mean, the market price and the potential corporate PPA prices you can get. And that's why normally you have had the emergence of corporate PPA, mostly in markets where you have low risk, because it allows you to bring down the cost a lot for installing new capacity. And also while having then the market price, which sits somewhere on an average level, so that there's a pure economic rationale going in, connecting new capacity at a price level lower than the market. Secondly, you need to have, of course, off-takers with certain rating capacity, because that facilitates a cheap financing structure. And you need the appropriate off-take availability and also the legal language. I mean, this you know better. You need to have the availability, and in different markets around the world, you can have one setup where you just install something next to the off-take, plug it straight in, or you can have in other markets what they call wheeling, where you install something and you bring it through the grid, and you have a specific off-take somewhere else. And then you need to understand the origin of your electricity. So I mean, in Serbia, it looks, at least from my high level perspective, not knowing the market that well yet, that comparing at least to Ukraine, in Ukraine, corporate PPA does not yet make sense, because on one side you have a very low subsidy or a low market price in general from low cost nuclear, and on the other side you have a very high financing cost. So installing new stuff will always be more costly than the market price. So then why would you do that? But in Serbia, the market price is probably more or less the same, or maybe slightly higher, I don't know exactly. But then the cost of installing new capacity is much lower, because, say, for example, the interest rate might be half of that in Ukraine. So, and also when you then start to discount future cost of, say, carbon costs, taxing, then it really starts to become a story. And that's why, for example, when we met with the energy minister of Serbia last month, I was asking for news about the carbon tax, because if you start to include carbon tax into the story in Serbia and neighboring markets, you basically open up a new box, which can facilitate the decarbonization process to happen even quicker. And this is what, of course, all of us in this call would like to see.
Yeah, exactly. I share your view. I think it's at this moment too early. It's not realistic to have a corporate PPA signed tomorrow. But in the next couple of years, when we have that synergy between stopping subsidizing coal energy, introduction of carbon taxes, market coupling, and real liberalized markets without domination of state utility and supplier, I think that will probably be a good option for new projects and their bankability and operability. We are approaching the end of this panel. I would ask my fellow panelists if they would like maybe to share their final thoughts, conclusions, expectations. Maria, Dr. Gordani. How do we get to greener future in a few years and in a couple of words?
Yeah, as you said, together, obviously. These are small markets, and I fully agree what you discussed with Magnus, and I think that we are definitely going to approach at least the strategies that we have only if we cooperate, especially as even geographically, we have more or less the same opportunities for wind, for power, for solar power plants, and I think that it is important to get the level of transparency and the level of involvement of private companies and to see more of them in the market in order to tackle or to at least leverage some aspects which are now a concern to us all. Also, I think that it is very important what you mentioned, Petar, and this is the aspect of managing the construction and the agricultural land at some point, because we see the same issues that you see. So I think that this is another aspect that should be solved. We should really try, not we, but the government, the driver, should really try to provide easier and more transparent procedures on how to develop the project and how to help the investors, and also the financing, the pricing, and the ability to choose is of importance there. So I think that all this should be taken into consideration when especially when we are discussing such complex projects as for example, wind and solar, etc.
Yeah, thank you. Where there is a will, there is a way. I mean,
yeah.
What we've seen, from example, how Serbia handled the regulatory reform beginning, it really gives optimism that the governments, the drivers, like you said, take into account what other stakeholders that should actually drive the market will have to say. So that's good. Dr. Gorgani, some of your final thoughts maybe. How do you see our future? I think you're muted on your second camera.
So thank you, Peter, again, even for expressing my final thoughts. And I think the cooperation is needed, but actually we lack of it needs a structured cooperation. So we lack it. So we have to be conscious of it. Then the solution has to base to the market mechanisms, and the solution will come from the market integration, regional market integration. That there are already different options on regard, and we have to find the mechanism or the way how to make incentivize and to make interested the key players to search and to reach the regional integration. This is very important. And another aspect has to do, for example, in this regard, all parties can be gained. For example, Albania in specific can have a valorization of its hydropower assets or the natural gas capacity storage that could offer to or balancing the services that get offered with the lower prices in economical way for the rest of the Balkans. And for example, there are even different options that we didn't mention, but even natural gas is very useful, and cooperation can be a solution in regard. For example, the YAP project that already start now from Fier, from the middle of Albania to the north to Croatia. It can be integrated and can be beneficial for all the parties if it integrated with the Mediterranean pipeline, gas pipeline, for example. It is even a shorter way. This is just to give an idea or to express how we can benefit differently from our specificities and how we can valorize each other. And in the last, for example, it is working for the certificates of origin. This is finally we are going to see this mechanism that is going to give a further support and the boost of the investments. In the last, I think we have to incentivize the consumers. We have to gain the consumer. It is not the uses only the production, but it is the uses of the consumers. And we have, I think, with all the mention, briefly mentioned above, we have to shift the support, the subsidies from investors to the consumers. If we do this, we are going to have even a further a boost of the plans and the market liberalization, the liquidity and the interests of the consumers, and it is going to complete all the process in the most sustainable way.
Yeah. Thank you for this. Definitely such an interesting topic that would require a weekly energy talks. We don't have time for that, of course, but definitely what you mentioned, gas, use of natural gas in the energy transition, the aspects, that's something that to give the idea to our dear hosts from Investing Network, that would be something that would be really interesting because of different views people have on that, but it's also like always with gas, it even goes broader than that. It's geopolitical issue as well. So it will definitely be very interesting to hear more. Magnus, you had to say, Inessa, apologies. We will maybe do a bit longer, just a few minutes. Yeah, Magnus.
Very quick and short, 3 key points. Stay the course, efficient, transparent process, which survey is really doing. Focus on the fuel. I mean, speak with the engines, understand what the engines need to be driving in the best possible way. The working group is a very good example. And then include a sufficient quota. And by setting the ceiling price, you're reducing the risk, the price risk. So then you can really work on the volume and implementation. And then hopefully in 5 to 10 years, you will have a society which is much less polluting and at a very limited extra subsidy cost.
Great, thank you. Inessa, apologies for for this longer, but it was, for me at least, was really interesting and pleasant. I would like to thank to my fellow panelists for this fruitful discussion and interesting insights, and to thank you at Invest in Network for this opportunity to be present here today.
And we would like to, we would like to thank you, Petar, for leading this interesting talk, and would like to thank you personally and both of the institutions you represent, UNtapped Serbia and also Karanovic and Partners. Thank you very much for your support. Also, thank you to all of our speakers today for very interesting and very informative presentations. And thanks to all the participants for being with us, staying with us today. All the presentations and also the recording will be made available to you within 24 hours. We just look forward to meeting all of you during our future events. And I'm really excited to let you know that we are planning to go back to hosting offline events from September. As many of you know, that all of our events are aimed at fostering the deployment of renewable energy in emerging markets. So please feel free to check our calendar of events for 2021-2022 and get in touch with us if you have any questions and if you're interested in participating in one of our events. Thank you so much. Have a nice day and stay safe and healthy. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.